One of the most exciting times in the NBA season, especially for more casual NBA fans, is the NBA trade deadline, which we're 23 days away from. And there's been no significant movement seemingly on any of the deals. And I think that is in large part due to the parity right now that we're seeing in the NBA. We're going to talk about how the parity is affecting the NBA trade deadline and what pieces could be on the move by some of the lesser teams in the NBA when the deadline does come up. We'll get into all that and more right after this.
The number one place for your daily basketball fix, NBA Central. Hosted by the one and only CEO Haize.
All right, basketball fans. So I've been thinking about this, right? And it's not like it's anything that takes a deep level of thought or anything like that, but it's just been something that's wildly on my mind. It's just how quiet the NBA trade deadline is. We've heard like some of the same names that we heard at the beginning of the season, the constant random trade for Buddy Hield or Miles Turner, the Bojan Bogdanovic being available, or, players like that. The Jay Crowder, who's literally been on the trade deadline since like the beginning and opening of free agency. It's been a lot of things and little rumors, but not any significant movement really on any of those. And it's really raised the question of, like, why is it? And I look at the standings in the NBA right now, and for example, in the Eastern Conference, between the 1 seed to the 6th seed, it's only 8 games. And then it's even less so from the 4th seed to the 10th seed. It's really only about 8 games separating that. And, so if you're in the middle of the pack team, if you're anywhere between that 4 to kind of 10 area in the NBA, most teams are probably convincing themselves, hey, we're not that far off. And that's what really parity does. You look at the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors, who just yesterday, as of this recording, were a play-in team. They win 1 game, and now they're the 7th seed, almost even out of the play-in tournament in the Western Conference. And that's why I think you're seeing it be more quiet around this NBA trade deadline. It's just there are so many teams that are only a few games behind in their mind that it's created this kind of false sense of we're not that far off. Let's be buyers more than sellers. Let's not give up anything significant. And so, you look at one of those teams and is probably going to blow it up, or it's going to take one team to make a major move, and then we may see a string of dominoes. But you could see, maybe for one of the first times in NBA history, most teams kind of hold on to their cards, see where their chips fall this season, and then maybe make their bigger adjustments in the offseason. And that's kind of what I think we're going to in the NBA. Now, you have the teams that are absolutely at the bottom and really have no hope of even making the play-in tournament, and you may see those teams sell off some pieces. But other than that, it's really kind of quiet. Even when you look at a team, you guys know I'm a Bulls fan, a team like the Chicago Bulls, like, yes, it's been a really disappointing season for them, especially if you're a Bulls fan, but technically they're 4 games out of missing the play-in tournament as far as, not having to pay being the 6th seed. So because of those things, it's like, I wonder how many teams are just hoping, like, or watching and monitoring and thinking, hey, we can go on a stretch, or if we can get healthy, or heck, if another team gets an injury, or maybe we look at that team and say, hey, listen, we don't think that the way that team's playing is sustainable. Let's go ahead and hold our cards because we think we can leapfrog them. There's a lot of that going on right now in the NBA. You hear like John Collins with the Atlanta Hawks, but then you may see the Hawks and say, hey, if we don't get a deal back to where we get a big enough piece back for John Collins to kind of keep us where we are, we're just going to hold on to him and see where we end up the season, and maybe we do something at the draft to try to move up that way. And it begs the question, like, are we going to see one of the least amount of activity at the trade deadline that we've ever seen? And then if that is the case, does that mean that we're going to see a ton of trades like at the draft for teams to try to move up or get draft picks, or maybe at the start of offseason, there's just a bevy of trades with teams just figuring out that their roster didn't work and trying to figure out why it didn't? Like, it just leads so many questions. And this is one of the times in the NBA where the play-in tournament makes sense and things like that, with just how much parity it is right now in both conferences in the NBA. And you can turn on any game on any given night and just see a really good game, even by some of the teams that are at the bottom and have no chance of making the play-in. So it's an interesting train of thought to see, like, which one of these moves towards the top of their conference makes any type of significant move, if they do. You look at like Boston. Do they do something? Highly unlikely. They're the number 1 team in the NBA, and it doesn't make really any sense for them to. The Brooklyn Nets, back at being the 2 seed after they dropped last week. Like, again, a hot week or a cold week in the NBA can drastically change where you're seated at and thus make you think you're closer to actually contending than what you are. When you look at it, there are really only, I say, maybe 3 or 4 teams in the NBA that are truly have a chance at a championship. But even me saying that doesn't mean that it's true, because all it takes is the right matchup in the playoffs, a team to get hot in the playoffs, especially if you're hanging around. You never know. And so I hope that it's shaping up to give us one of the most exciting playoffs that we've seen in a while overall, from the first round to the finals. But it begs the question on this. So what are the pieces that could be on the move at this trade deadline? And because I'm going to keep away from a lot of the teams at the top, I'm going to look at just the bottom feeders in the NBA right now. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because these are the teams that are more likely to blow it up. These are the teams that aren't really performing towards their expectations, and they may look and say, hey, we're about to pay this guy, we're paying this guy this to just be where we are. Let's go ahead and move on from that. We might as well get worse. Maybe try to tank a little bit to get Victor Wembanyama here on the back half of the season. And the first team that I'm going to go to is the Charlotte Hornets. Michael Jordan is the worst owner in all of sports, and I think most people know that and understand that as far as just getting the job done. But when you look at pieces that could potentially be on the move for them, we've already heard Terry Rozier could be on the move. You look at Kelly Oubre Jr., who has a sizable contract, Mason Plumlee, PJ Washington. These are players that they could look to move from this roster and try to get worse to solidify, maybe going after that potential generational talent in Victor Wembanyama to pair that with LaMelo Ball. It's so crazy that Jordan got his superstar through the draft, right? After the Charlotte Hornets missed on so many draft picks over the last 10 years, they got it, and they have not just been able to put a team around him. And the Charlotte Hornets sit right now as the worst team in the Eastern Conference. And this is a team that had playoff aspirations, absolutely. So you look at them, they could be a team that looks to move some of their pieces. The next team up, another Eastern Conference team, is the Detroit Pistons. And on their roster, Sadiq Bey's a potential, Alex Burks, Nerlens Noel, and of course, Bojan Bogdanovic, who got signed an extension. But of course, that could actually bode well for a team, especially if you are a contending team with a nice window open for a couple of more years. You add Bojan to your roster, maybe for a first-round pick that's not going to be super high, and you see what you can do. But I look at this Detroit Pistons roster, second worst team in the Eastern Conference right now. They only have 12 wins on the season. They're absolutely a team that could look to sell off some of that, especially veteran talent that they have, go completely young and just let that figure out. Again, another team that could be in that Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes as well. So they're definitely a team that I think is a threat to kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily blow up their roster, but definitely trade a lot of pieces on their roster. The next one up is a Western Conference team. Our first one on the list, that's the Houston Rockets. Eric Gordon, Kenyon Martin Jr. Kenyon Martin Jr. asked for a trade early in the offseason. They didn't get one. He is a nice piece that can defend, shoot some threes, play multiple positions that teams could look at. And then Eric Gordon, the veteran, the scorer off the bench. Every team needs scoring off the bench, especially in the playoffs. Adding depth can't hurt. Of course, the size of his contract keeps that deal from being a minor deal. You kind of gotta, unless you have a contract that's just kind of sitting around, maybe an injured player or something like that. But I definitely think those are two pieces that could be on the move from the Houston Rockets, as the Houston Rockets right now are the worst team in the Western Conference. And then next up, the Orlando Magic. This team is just, when you look at the Orlando Magic's offseason, it's kind of crazy. Bol, who's been balling out for them, has really made Mo Bamba expendable. And you look at the Orlando Magic, who renounced the rights to Mo Bamba. He was an unrestricted free agent. Then they end up signing him on a 1+1 deal anyway at $10.5 million per year. It was just wild. They haven't played him consistently. He hasn't got to look after having his best season as a pro, not really getting off the bench at all as Mo Bamba. He definitely a player that could be on the move. Terrence Ross as well, another veteran, a veteran piece on that team that they could look to move, get worse. Gary Harris, RJ Hampton. RJ Hampton, a younger player, wasn't drafted too long ago. If you are a team that wants an injection of some young talent, you could be looking at RJ Hampton. So that's the players on the Orlando Magic that I'll look. And then the last team we're going to talk about today is the San Antonio Spurs. When you look at the Spurs, a team that everybody expected to tank coming into this season, and if they get Victor Wembanyama, it'd be crazy if they do. And the San Antonio Spurs right now, the second worst team in the Western Conference by record, only having 13 wins on the season. You look at Jakob Poeltl. He's been a player that most people have had in some type of trade conversations for the most part of the season. I wouldn't mind if the Chicago Bulls go after him, but a very solid center that can come in and do some things. if you want to shore up that starting center spot, Jakob Poeltl, you could do a lot worse than Jakob Poeltl. And then on top of that, if you want to just have him, if you have the luxury of having him on your bench, even more so. So we'll see a talented big man who isn't a huge scorer by any means, but he just does all the little things well, and he can be a very good system player on most teams. Another one, Josh Richardson. His career has just gone so crazy, but definitely a trade piece. And last, Doug McDermott. Again, a player who started off kind of disappointing to what people expected of him coming out of college, but has rounded out to a very solid pro, putting together a solid professional career. Definitely a piece that could fit on a lot of teams, bring some shooting, bring some size, bring a little bit of rebounding as well. Those are the pieces that I look at, and those are the teams that I think are most likely to give up some major pieces, major rotational pieces on their rosters, because I just think a lot of the teams at the top aren't going to be looking at even some of the teams in, let's not focus on the top. Most of the teams in the middle of the pack area may be looking to buy rather than sell. And so we'll see. This is shaping up to be a very interesting trade deadline in the NBA. Let me know what you guys think on that. Let me know what you guys think on the parity on the NBA as well. Let me know all that down below. You can follow the show at NBA Central Show on Twitter, if I could think correctly. Then you finally got social media for it. You can also send us any feedback, questions, comment, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text and our voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are, hopefully, at some point, the number one spot for everything basketball related. We out this mug. Peace, y'all, man. Enjoy basketball. This is what it boils down to. With all the things going on this season, and, trade conversations and those things are always going to be fun to talk about, but let's just enjoy the basketball we're seeing this season, man. But that's it for me today, man. Peace, y'all. Love y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.